Well, come on in. Welcome. Come on. You are in the principal's office. Don't be scared. I'm your host, Michelle Pennix, and we are here to focus on all things related to education and the Black community. You're my guest, and today we're going to delve into so many topics that are important and relevant to you. I'm excited because on this show, we get to the bottom of the issue. And we'll all do that, always do that, being honest and solution focused. I'm your host, Michelle Pennix, or Principal Pennix to most. And on today's show, we are going to talk about a topic that is extremely important to our community. It is a topic that many of you are not familiar with, but it is the keystone to making sure that your children grow up and are educated in a way that your family values, is ready for the future in a way that your family deems most necessary and important. We're going to do that by talking about the topic of unschooling. And just to give you a little bit of background, I have enlisted the help of three books to help me study around this topic of unschooling. The first is Free to Learn by Peter Gray. Free to Learn explores how unleashing the instinct to play will make your children happier, more self-reliant, and better students for life. The topic book Unschooled, Raising Curious, Well-Educated Children Outside the Conventional Classroom by Carrie McDonald. And last but not least, Unschooling Works, Using Self-Directed Learning to Homeschool Our Children by Lanita Nash. When we come back from this break, we'll learn why this is exactly what unschooling is about. So stay tuned. We'll see you in a bit.
Filmmaker Kevin Willis is celebrating 10 years, a decade of servicing our community with deals on wheels at Toyota of Louisville, 6514 Dixie Highway. He's the #1 high-volume car dealer. Call him today so he can create you a deal of a lifetime at 502-408-0888. 10 years. Kevin Willis at Toyota of Louisville. 10 years of finding you deals, of getting you done. That's Kevin Willis, the deal maker with Toyota of Louisville, 6514 Dixie Highway. Be sure to check out the deal maker on social media. Friend him on Facebook. Follow him on Twitter. It's the deal maker, Kevin Willis at Toyota of Louisville.
Welcome back. And today we are talking about a topic that many of you are not familiar with the title of, but are very familiar with doing, and that is the topic of unschooling. When we talk about unschooling, we are talking about a label that has been assigned to some of the things that you've been doing for years with your own children in your home. And today we want to go a little bit deeper. And so if you noticed, every week on the Principal's Pennix, I try to dress the part and let you know exactly how serious the business of education is. But today I chose to dress a little bit differently because I want you to feel totally at home. The reason I want you to feel at home is because that is what unschooling is all about. Unschooling is taking learning to a whole nother level. It is about educating children through living rather than standard curriculum and content that comes from the school. So as we talk about unschooling through living, I wanted to provide you with some concrete examples so that you can transfer what you've learned from this show into teaching your own children at home. Whether they're in a homeschooling situation or whether they are in an online learning situation, your children are learning all the time. So today we want to teach you how to be more intentional about what they're learning, and to tell you at the same time, this method has become more and more popular in recent years as parents and society begins to examine the real purpose of education. What do we want our children to learn, and what's the best way to get there? Is it through a set of standards presented to us by our school boards and our national government, or is it a way of looking at learning through the curiosity that children naturally bring with them? So today I'm going to use some real examples. I've also got a small studio audience in here to help me with questions when I come to them as well, because it is about your child's own curiosity and bridging that gap. We're going to do this through a series of questions that some of you may remember when you were in school, and that's called a KWL chart. So KWL except this time we're also going to add another letter, and that's going to be an H. All right, so when we do a KWL chart, what we're trying to find out is what we know about a subject, what we want to learn about a subject, what we want to learn. Oh, look, want to learn. And we love mistakes because mistakes is how you learn. The L is what we actually learned. And we're going to make columns. And then there's only one letter left, H. And what's different about the H is how we're going to learn it. So as we unschool, we teach our children how to learn through actual living. We're going to do that through the model of KWHL. We're going to ask what we know, what we want to learn, how we're going to learn it, and then finally what we learned about a topic. So today I want to start by showing you how truly simple this is. I've got a couple guests that'll help me. We're going to take an everyday object as home. I've got a few up here with me. We're going to start with the simplest of all, a fork, right? Everybody has a fork in their house. And so let's see what we can learn about a fork that is going to teach us some lifelong skills. So just the fork as we use, what do we already know about a fork? So we might say, we know that a fork is something you eat with. All right, what else do we know about a fork? And my studio audience is going to respond at any time. We might talk over each other. What else do we know about a fork? It is a metal. Silver. It is silver. What else do we know about a fork? It has 4 prongs. Oh, that's a word we're going to go to. It has 4 prongs. Anything else that we know about a fork before we move on? It has a handle. All right, so let's just stop there. We know we could continue to go on. We might talk about it's decorated. We might talk about it usually goes with a spoon and a knife. But if we just stick with these 5, there are all kinds of things that we can investigate about a fork. And as we go to the next column, what we want to learn, we're going to take each one of these and unschool it. First, we're going to say, okay, eat with. What questions do we have about a fork and how we eat with it? It might be what?
What kind of food you eat with it?
Okay, food to use with it. We might also eat with, think about what? Can it have what? That's what I love. I love the silence to make people think. What else do you want to know? Eat with it. The good news is if there's not an answer, just keep going. I'm going to come back to it. All right, what do we want to know about metal in this fork? What do we want to learn about metal in this fork? Is this what?
Hard metal.
Is it hard metal?
Does it bend?
Does it bend? What type of metal? Okay. Then next, we've got the topic of its actual color. So what do we want to learn about silver? What questions come to mind thinking about silver?
Is it real silver?
Oh, real as opposed to fake? Uh-oh. Again, why do we like mistakes? Because they help us to learn. We can't learn without a mistake. Try again. Real or fake? Remember, we're unschooling. We're not looking at a standard and saying we got to attach it to that. We're looking at our own curiosity to find out what we want to learn about a topic. So silver, is it real or fake? What about 4 prongs? What are you curious about with the prongs on a fork? What are you curious about with the prongs on a fork? Does it have to be 4? Can it be more? Have to be 4? We're unschooling. What else do we want to know about prongs? First of all, this is a word I don't know much about. Do you? What else are prongs? I'd like to find out its definition. What else can we say about the prongs of a fork? What else can we think about? Have you ever seen baby forks? What are you thinking?
How long they are.
The length. All right, we're unschooling a fork. We're getting all this information from a simple fork. Last but not least, the handle came up. Somebody said we know it has a handle. What questions do we have about a handle on a fork? What questions might we have about a handle on a fork?
What design is on the handle?
Okay, the design. And when you say design, I think about most efficient, right? The most efficient design. Now, you'll notice I had somebody in my studio audience, efficient. All right, there we go. Who yelled out one, and then I took on one too because I wanted to make sure that we also guide our children in experiences that let them expand their mind. We call those windows and mirrors. So mirrors are things that come out easily. It's a reflection of yourself. Windows are gateways to the world. So my student said design, that was a mirror. And I said most efficient, that's a window, something that he may not have been thinking about. All right, so just from this one fork, look at how we've unschooled this. Traditionally in school, you would not be using a instrument, you would not be using a specific item to think about what you're learning. But in an unschooling method, you can choose anything in your environment, anything that was created for thought or for people to use to actually learn from. And that's what makes unschooling such an untraditional method of education, but one that many parents are picking up on as we continue to examine why are children going to school? What can we teach them differently as they prepare for the world? So now we know we have a fork. We know the questions that we want to learn about a fork. From what foods do you use with it to is the metal a hard or a soft metal? Does it bend and what type of metal is it? We also want to know, is it real or fake metal? We also want to know why 4 prongs? Does it have to be on a fork? And what does a prong mean? What are some other prongs that we may use or be around? Then also the length of the prongs. Does that change? Is it a baby? Is it meant for babies? Is it meant for adults? The design of the handle and what's most efficient design of the handle that would make it good for eating. So once we have what we know just by looking, what we want to know just by asking good questions, mirrors and windows, we now go to how will we learn about these things. So this is when you as the adult comes in, but also again, gather information from your child. So what type of information are we going to use to inform these answers? Who can we look to? What can we use to find out how we're going to learn the answers to this? So how are we going to learn which foods are best to use with a fork? How are we going to learn that?
Hands-on.
Ooh, so I heard hands-on. And when I hear hands-on, I think fun. I also think experiment. And when we think experiment, we think science. And guess what? You've just had a science lesson when you do this. How else are we going to learn about how hard the metal is? And does the metal bend? What kind of things can we do there to find out more? Can we do another experiment? Can we get hands-on with it? But what else could we do? Because we're going to get into some questions that maybe we won't be able to necessarily do by an experiment. So what can we do to learn more?
You can Google it.
Ooh, that's everybody's new favorite word, right? Google it. Now, when you Google it, what do you have to make sure you do? Can you just go to the first thing on the page? No, first you're going to look to see if it's an ad or sponsored. Then you know it was geared to sell you something. But you're going to move past those. And then how many different articles are you going to look up about the bend of the metal or the type or if it's hard? How many are you going to look up? I'll give you a hint. It's the same number of days that Jesus was away from us. 3. Yes, bingo. 3 different articles. I'm going to put articles or 3 different resources All right, so we can do hands-on experiments. We can Google it. What else can we do to find out if it's real or fake? Or what else can we do to find out if it has to be 4 prongs? What else can we do?
Create our own fork.
Ooh, think about that. Create our own fork. Now, when he said that, I immediately want to, in my mind, create a new fork. But I don't want to turn down what he's had to say because it's his learning that we're trying to do. But I'll just add is it a window or a mirror if somebody else adds it to you? It's a window. So create your new fork. What else am I going to do when it comes to the handle, the design, and most efficient? Is that going to be done by maybe creating your own fork or a new fork? Any other thing that we can do to make sure that we learn about a fork and it informs our learning?
Yeah, other people's opinion.
Woo! Other people's opinion. I think that would be a survey, right? We'd survey other people about the use of the fork. Now, just back up with me and look at what you've done. In this short period of time, from one fork, you have created your own curriculum. And you are going to be studying all these different aspects through hands-on experiments, by Googling it, researching it, looking it up. I don't know if they have books about forks, but I bet you they do. Even going to the library and looking up a book about forks. Amazon, a book about forks. You're going to create your own fork. What kind of materials would you use to create your own forks? Could you use Play-Doh? Yeah, it would harden, right? What else could you use to create your own fork? What about, I'm thinking of a mirror. Somebody give me a reflection. Give me a window. What else could you use to create a fork?
Aluminum foil.
Aluminum foil. We're going to create a new fork. We're going to survey. And when you talk about survey, what subject do you talk about? Where do you get data for the survey? What content area is that? Is that science and
Math.
science and math? We talked about hands-on experiments, same thing, science and math. Sci and math. What about Google it? What subject area? Reading, right? Reading, research. All right, going to the library, reading a book, and creating our own. When we get to creating our own fork or a new fork or recreating the fork that was given to us, what are we going to have to research to know about how to do that? Are we going to look at other people maybe who've done the same thing or where forks were even invented? So when we talk about that, what subject is that? History, which is social studies or history. So in this one item found in every American kitchen, we have created a curriculum that includes reading, math, science, and social studies. I would think it would take us approximately, maybe about 40 hours of work, in-depth study to do all of this, to work through it together. But at the end of it, we're going to fill in what we learned. And is this going to be enough space, you think, to fill in what we've learned? Probably not. Probably not. By the time we finish, we're going to have a little PowerPoint technology or a mini book that we've created to explain everything that we've learned. We may even have chapters in our book or our PowerPoint that explain how we started and where we went from there. And that was all a fork. And that is what unschooling is all about. School traditionally, when you go, chooses a subject like reading and says, today we're going to read about forks. And while that may be exciting to some, for most it's not. But learning how to read about forks while at the same time creating our own or finding out different experiments that we can do with it and surveying people on the use of it makes it a lot more interesting. We are not bound by time. There is not a 1 hour or 3 hours that we're going to read about it or go to the library and invest in a book about it. Instead, we're going to take all of this information and we're going to spend as much time as necessary to get a deep understanding of this fork and how it relates to us and our learning. This method is called UnSchooling, and this takes learning out of the book and into lifelong learning. And this is what we want you to be encouraged to do with your own child, not only if they're in homeschool, but also if they are on online learning. Because education happens 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, and it continues for a lifelong journey. Don't just stick your nose in a book, but get out of the book and apply it to real life. I'm Michelle Pennix, your host, and for the last few minutes, we have been talking about unschooling as a way to move from the classroom to the home, from the book to actual study that will last you a lifetime. We meet here every week, same time, same place, as I share with you the importance of education and the Black community, a different perspective maybe you haven't heard before. I hope you heard that with the topic of unschooling today to generate some of your own ideas. We'll meet again here next week, same time, same place. Until then, as always, to God be the glory.